All right, cool. So just to jump straight into it. So for people that are not aware of who you are and that kind of stuff, can you just give like a super brief, bio of like who you are, what you do, and kind of like your journey up to this point?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ed Holloway-George. I mean, I've been an Android developer now for a long, long time. It feels like forever, but it's probably been close to about 10 years. I've kind of worked my way through different industries. I started off at a startup, moved to an agency, and have now settled kind of at a rather larger company, at ASOS, who are a fashion retailer. And yeah, I've been interested in all sorts of aspects of Android for a long time, and security is something that I've particularly been interested in, and something that I've really picked up of late as not only a passion project, but as something that I want to sort of bring to the wider community and expose. So yeah, I think that's kind of my journey up to now.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. All right, cool. That kind of ticks off the box that I was looking for. So awesome.
Sure.
So moving on from that. So how did you get, or like what drew you into security in terms of like app development? And the reason that I ask is because the only people that I'm aware of that know any of this stuff are people that have their own apps. And so, they wanted to combat people cracking their apps so they didn't have to pay for it or all of that kind of stuff. And outside of that, like literally, I've never worked at a company. Now, I tell a lie, I've probably worked at like 2 companies out of a lot of companies that have ever expressed any interest in like, is our app secure and all the kind of things that you've talked about in some of your talks. So like, what kind of drew you into that?
That's a really good question. You know what? I when it came to sort of security and my interest in security, it didn't initially come through my sort of Android app developer experience. Okay. It came through watching loads of YouTube videos and seeing really interesting YouTubers, people like John Hammond, people like Live Overflow, who do kind of talks about security and ethical hacking and perform sort of videos on CTFs, capture the flag events, which I find really interesting. So I kind of got into security kind of generally in that by watching multiple content creators, and then I wanted to learn more about something about security and what I am also passionate about, which is Android app development. So the two kind of married up really, really nicely. And what I found was really interesting was that there wasn't a lot of, for something that's such a, integral part of, the Android developer role, there wasn't that many people talking about it. And I found that really strange. And I wanted to dive deeper into the subject. And naturally, I've kind of found myself as somebody that is talking a lot about it in the community. And I'm hoping that through podcasts such as this or talks I've done in the past, that I'm trying to expose, that this is a critical area that we should all be thinking about and is often overlooked. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
Okay, cool. All right, so that kind of explains it. So, on a side kind of note, right? So you work at a very big retailer in the UK. I don't know where they reach out to, but I know in the UK everybody knows ASOS. Sure. In terms of like your day to day, how much of the security aspect of development like do you deal with?
We have a champion program at ASOS, which I don't know how much I can go into, but we do have a very good cybersecurity team at ASOS, and I work closely with them and my colleagues. So in terms of my actual role, I try and split part of my week to do it. It's something that I try and work on a little bit every day. It's not officially part of my a job description per se, but it's something that I've been trying to push within my team and certainly, other teams within the business. And I think it's something that anybody with a passion in security can do within their organization. It doesn't really matter if the organization's size, but sure, if you've got a great cybersecurity team such as as ASOS, like it's quite easy to do and set up. So I think that's kind of in my day-to-day, probably, maybe in a week, maybe a couple of hours is something I dedicate directly to it. But yeah, I'd love to do it full time. But I like developing apps too much to kind of split it that much.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, cool. It's interesting because, like I said, like I've worked at, and I won't mention names because I don't want to get myself or anyone in trouble, but I've worked at like fairly big companies in the UK as well, and like similar to ASOS, and zero interest in security whatsoever, which is always like surprised me. I think people kind of take for granted that the apps and, you know, Android and iOS are secure by default, like it's as if they're not computers, and that's never the case. So I want to jump into a little bit about kind of, I guess, like so I'm going to assume people that are listening have, you know, they have an idea of like security, but most people, at least that I speak to, have an idea of like, you know, if I get an email from a random person, don't click that link, and those kind of things. And they don't necessarily, or they're not necessarily aware of the kind of threats as a user perspective using a smart device. And then secondly, from a development perspective, like I have, you know, no idea what the kind of things are that I should be looking for. So in that sense, like, what are some of the things, I guess, like, what are some of the ways that apps that you've seen could be exposed or like are vulnerable? And then what are some of the things as a developer that you should be looking out for when you're coding that maybe, you know, people generally don't think about?
That's a really great question. I think, I mean, there's several great examples of, you know, really easy things that we can do as app developers to make sure our apps are secure. It's as simple as it can start as simple as just not putting things that you wouldn't want to share in your app. So when I say, you know, it's quite trivial to, you know, take an app and reverse engineer it. And if, for example, if you've got a secret key or a secret password, or, you know, I think there was a report recently that, you know, upwards of I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was a scarily high percentage of apps contain AWS keys, for example, that could be used to access, you know, secure AWS instances. And it's as simple as that. And in terms of kind of what threats are out there, I mean, a good place to start with this would be OWASP, who are a free-for-profit organization that allow basically. They produce a list of the top 10 threats to mobile, and I definitely would recommend going out and familiarizing yourself with that. I've done 2 talks on it. I'm also writing a blog post series on that at the moment. So shameless promotion there, but it's a really good overview of some of the threats that we face as app developers. And in terms of kind of steps to prevent this, there's plenty of tools on the market. So I'm sure we're all familiar with the names ProGuard, and you know, DexGuard is a paid version of ProGuard by the same people that make it. We have you know, free tools such as MobSF, which can be used to provide kind of a security analysis on your APKs. And there's a million and one different tools out there that we can use as developers to make our apps more secure. Certainly, I think familiarizing yourself with the OWASP top 10 is a very, very good place to start, and actually something you can do relatively easily. The examples they give are excellent. So I would definitely start there. I hope that answers your question. It's such a broad subject that there's so many different ways that apps can be exploited. I'm trying to think of a good example of one. I think a very good example, actually, that I tweeted about just today or yesterday was Hyundai, the car manufacturer. They used when they wrote their secure code for their Android Auto app, they encrypted their update files using a sample that is freely available online. So they basically copied and pasted a tutorial, and without changing anything. So some developer found this, and they've been able to reverse engineer, you know, their whole car and their ecosystem, which is for you know, billion dollar companies make these mistakes all the time. You know, I think it's a mindset switch that we all need as developers to kind of switch on and realize that this is, you know, there are people that will look through your code. It doesn't matter how big or small your app is. People will look through your code. So I think, you know, treat everybody, you know, as sort of when don't treat people like they're not going to touch it, because they are. So that's the best advice I'd give, for sure.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I was going to say, I think people make 2 assumptions that are definitely wrong, which is one, big companies, developers that work at Hyundai must be, like God level developer or however you want to put it. It's like they're just developers, they make mistakes the same as us, and somebody's going to exploit it. And in the same vein, like people that have small indie apps, like I remember like myself in like 2012, I have an app that has, had 1,000 users, and it was cracked and put up somewhere for someone to download for free. And that's not like I'm a nobody. Somebody obviously just did that for fun. Like, oh, cool, I saw this app on a forum. Let me crack it and see what happens. So definitely that's things that people don't look out for. But something, I don't know if you can hear that, but my dogs are going crazy. So I'll probably just leave that.
That's all good. Don't worry. I'm surprised mine isn't.
So, well, we have, like, on a side note, so we have a dog who's like great, right? Normally she's laying right here during the podcast, no problems. And then my partner decided to house sit 2 other dogs. And so now they just set each other off. One of them barks at a car outside, and then it's just like, it's like being in a madhouse.
It's a chain reaction. Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah,
I can imagine. Yeah. I feel like I saw somewhere, I must have been going through your blog or your Twitter or something, and I saw something about that you had, was it a Pomeranian, is that right?
Or I do. I have a little Pomeranian. I don't tend to put his name out on the internet, but he's 2 years old. He's incredibly noisy. He likes to join me on meetings. In fact, I don't know if it's the same with your dogs, but he likes to wait until he knows I'm busy before he wants attention. Which is that's the problem. Like, love him to pieces, but sometimes you just need to get stuff done. And he's just got a sixth sense. He knows. So that's but yeah, he's great. He's my little sidekick most of the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like everybody, including myself, thinks that their own dog is great, and then it's just everybody else's dog that's just like, oh my god.
Oh, don't worry, he's a pain. He's a pain. I will tell everybody he's a pain, but we love him. We love him nonetheless.
Yeah. I was going to say, you have to. Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. So steering it back to the security side of things just a little bit. So something that I wanted to ask you, and so I'm going to link up the Spaghetti Dev blog, and there's a bunch of talks on there so people can go and check it out, because I'll definitely recommend that. But in terms of like protecting your app, so one thing that I wanted to ask and get your opinion of is, at this point in time, or maybe at any point in time, do you think that there is any benefit to like root detection and jailbreak detection? And because, some companies, like if your app's rooted or jailbroken, if your phone is, sorry, that it won't run. And because like I've come across this in a project I was working on recently, and my immediate response was like, we're just wasting our time. And that was just from a quick Google, was like, how do you prevent, like, how do you detect root? Okay, you use this library stopped working 3 months ago, and it's like a cat and mouse game. But in terms of the things that can be exploited, is there any benefit now to doing that, or are there things that people could be doing that are much better than just, detect root or detect jailbreak and don't run?
Yeah, that's a great question. I personally have never implemented that on any app that I've worked on. Mm-hmm. You're right. It's very much a cat and mouse game, because as soon as there's plenty of solutions out there. The first one that comes to mind is things like root beer, which I'm sure is the most common library that people use for that. But it's an open source project, so it's not especially difficult to kind of crack, because all the code's in public,
right?
So the cat and mouse game of, as soon as some root detection is implemented, the crackers, the hackers are one step ahead all the time. There are paid solutions for that, which I think it really depends on your use case as well, like whether you really want to go down that route. I mean, if you are bound by sort of compliance laws, so banking, there's plenty of laws and regulations and that, and they differ all over the world. So if you're kind of bound by legal stuff, then perhaps it's worth doing. I certainly would expect my bank to have as much detection as they can physically put in.
Sure.
But does my my tiny little weather app need, I don't know, does it need root detection? Not really. If there's no, I think it's all about being sensible. If you are, where possible, especially, when it comes to sort of user data, you want to be having as minimal user data on your saved to your device as possible. And if you're making API calls, you want to be following the best practices for that as well. Make sure that you're authenticating your calls, you are using tokens correctly. You're not storing unencrypted sort of passwords or anything on your device, etc. So I think as long as you're following the vast majority of the rest of the best practices, root detection is something that you can most often avoid. It's quite a big overhead. It's something that you need to keep on top of. As if you're using a paid for solution, then you're probably slightly better off because you've at least got probably some guarantees in your contract that you're going to get updates, etc. Whereas if you're using free solutions, then it's only a matter of time, really. That's in both cases. The hackers and crackers are so good. Yeah. You really need to be on top of it. So I'd say depending on your use case, I wouldn't say I've got an especially controversial opinion on that. I know people do, but I think my opinion is it all depends on your use case for sure.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. So moving past that a little bit. So I was watching your talk yesterday, I think it was. And one of the things that you brought up, which is Android specific use case, but I'm sure there's equivalents on iOS, is, everybody saves a bunch of things in shared preferences, which is somewhere that you're just supposed to save like keys and strings. You're not supposed to do a ton of stuff. You're not supposed to do anything in there that's sensitive, basically. And then you offered a solution up, which is like you can get, secure shared preferences, which is a form of encryption inside shared preferences, right? But my question is, with that, like, sure, that means that if I was wanting to look inside your shared preferences, I can't because I'm not a hacker. I don't know how to do that stuff. It would take me way too long on Google and I'd lose interest, right? But for someone that's determined to do it, is like, I guess the question is like, in my mind, there's a point where you can get to, but there's never a point where you can get to where you can say like, yes, this app is secure. Because like even with that, surely the key for, if you're encrypting your database, the key's somewhere inside the app to decrypt it. So given a bit of time and effort. So like I guess the question is like, is there a point where it's like, this is as much as you can do and you just have to accept that like your security is 99%, by that 1%, there's always that vulnerability?
I mean, when it comes to software, yeah, there's always going to be that point. But the thing is with, especially now moving forwards with kind of more modern devices, we also have hardware. Yeah. And because the hardware, you can have secure enclaves in hardware, and use things such as key store on hardware. The same way that iOS works, for example. It becomes a lot harder, and in actual fact, it makes things a lot harder. If we go back, 5-6 years, before this was really a popular thing, or you had to have super high-end devices to have that sort of security on a chip kind of deal. It was a lot more easy to crack these sort of things. So I think through using the hardware side of things, you can save stuff in, shared preferences securely by using Google's Jetpack security library, and I believe that does use the hardware to do that. Again, I think the question you always need to be asking is, do I need to be saving this data at all on the device? If you are, I hope I said this in my talk. I must admit I don't remember, but I hope I pointed out that if you're at a point where you are thinking about having to encrypt shared preferences, you really need to ask yourself some questions of, why am I doing this? Could this be stored somewhere better, i.e. on a server or somewhere that's not on my device? And I think I don't think there's no risk involved with doing any of this, but certainly when it comes to sort of having hardware support, etc., then this makes life a lot easier for us, and it does mean that there is an added level of security there, which is a lot harder for hackers and crackers to sort of access.
Okay, so bottom line is, if you have to store something sensitive and you can store it in hardware storage, then you should do that, because I guess that kind of takes the onus off you and puts it on the OS to keep it secure, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still, if you can use the sort of hardware-based security, then yes, absolutely. When you say sort of save to hardware, please don't save stuff directly to files unencrypted.
Sure.
You want to be using encryption. You want the keys to be stored securely, etc. So that's absolutely.
Yeah, by hardware, I did not mean like the hard drive for people that are listening. Like, don't just save it to storage on your phone and be like, oh yeah, sweet, it's cool. Yeah. All right, awesome. All right, so I kind of wanted to ask. So again, I was watching this talk, and one thing that I wasn't super familiar with was tap jacking. And the only reason that I was like mildly familiar is because my banking app won't let me do stuff when I have an app that does like night light. So, it changes the whole screen to red. It won't let me do stuff unless I turn that off, because it overlays the screen, right? So the tap jacking thing was like super interesting. But is there anything else, or if there's a better example of the tap jacking like in action, then go for that. But is there anything kind of interesting like that you've seen that people might not be aware of?
So I think a common approach. So for those that don't know what tap jacking is, essentially it's hijacking your phone and performing actions on it as if you were sort of performing those actions yourself. So it can do. It's as if it's sort of like a ghost doing it. And it's quite scary when you see videos of it, because it's done so quickly. You can hardly notice it sometimes. And the way the way that that's done is really interesting, actually. It's an abuse of the accessibility framework that Android offers. So many of you listening will probably maybe use an accessibility feature of some sort. It could be, using a larger font. It could be a screen reader. It could be whatever. But a lot of apps, basically, when you have an accessibility app, you want essentially full control of a device to be able to provide accessibility features. And for years and years, that framework has been abused, and it's actually becoming a lot more locked down, I think, in future. I can't remember the specifics, but for sure, it's Android has acknowledged this, and they certainly are adding more permissions surrounding giving apps accessibility control. And that's essentially how malicious apps do tap jacking, is that they will request as many permissions as possible, particularly in the accessibility framework, to be able to basically take over and manage your device and do whatever and perform whatever actions. So it's scary. It can capture your touches. It can perform touches. It's weird. It's definitely you should definitely take some time to go on YouTube and watch some examples. So it's pretty scary. It's an area that I don't know, I must admit, a lot about. It's not something that I've looked into in depth. And actually, now talking about it makes me want to go and Google it right away and learn a lot more about it. Thankfully, I think the permission model that Android has protected against this relatively well, especially since we've beefed that up in more recent years. And definitely going forwards, I know the accessibility framework is going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more difficult to give an app full permissions, which in one sense is good, and also for accessibility users maybe not so good. So I think it's a difficult balance that the Android team have got, but that's essentially how it's done, and it's I'm glad you asked that. It's a great question.
Yes, it's super interesting, because I have an app that used to require accessibility services because it reads notifications, and then at some point they introduced notification service, and so you didn't have to do that anymore. But when I did have that, there was no like, I need this service or I need this permission to just be able to read your notifications. It was just blanket permission. I need access to your entire device, yes or no. And so like, it's cool that that's changed, but I didn't think about the different ways it could be used. And I was watching that video where, it's overlaying like a contacts app or something, and it's just like, dialing the buttons for you. And I was like, oh, that's super. It's one of those things where it's like, you want to go and build something that does it just so you can see how it works. Cause it seems like, it would be really cool. But on a side note from that, so moving on just a little bit. So I think we covered most of the things that I want to talk about, but something that's interesting to me. So not super security related, but you've done a couple of talks now, on this. You've got another one coming up at DroidCon, which I'm going to try and catch. But I kind of wanted to ask you, like, what made you want to give talks about this? Cause like your talks, at least the one that I saw, was like an hour long. I think maybe that one was on Zoom, but it was like an hour long, right? And I've given talks, and like 15 minutes and I'm ready to quit because, you know, I feel like that's how much attention I get. After 15 minutes, I'm done. It's like, what made you want to give talks? And like, do you not find it super daunting to give an hour-long talk?
So for me, I think I guess talking for an hour is pretty extreme. I think what the good news is, I think the talks you will have seen were two separate talks that were essentially part 1 and part 2. Thankfully, they were half an hour each. So I luckily haven't had to do a whole hour talking yet. I think if I talked for an hour, people would be nodding off pretty soon into it.
I mean, but to be fair, I found them super informative. The one that I watched was like, I could have watched that for an hour. But personally doing it, I would have been like, oh my God, I need to stop now. Because like it's just too much. So
thankfully in the community, you know, there's plenty of great speakers who, you know, I've been fortunate enough to have seen over many years, and you know, for me, talking and doing talks and giving talks and is a relatively new thing. I think I've only been doing it for the last sort of year. I really wanted to do it though because it's something that I find I've previously found quite difficult to do. I'm quite a shy individual in reality, so I've always wanted to try and push myself out there a bit. And you know, for me, I'm really passionate about giving back. I've you know, been very, very fortunate to have, you know, the career I've had so far, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a lot of the you know, the names in the community that have been around for a long time. And it's really, I think we're at a really exciting point with Android where we're seeing this kind of new paradigm shift. Compose is coming in, and it's you know, we've seen Kotlin come in as well, and I think it's almost like a new era of development. And I feel that you know, having the experience that I do, it'd be really nice to take some of that and give it back to people. And that's why I enjoy doing things like this. It's why I enjoy writing blogs. It's why I enjoy doing talks. And for me, the added benefit is that I get to learn something I didn't know about, so security, for example, and I get to hopefully make people passionate about what I'm learning about as well. Yeah. So it's almost like a journey where I'm going on it myself. You know, I said to you when we first started talking, you know, I wouldn't say I'm a security expert by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. I would definitely say at this stage I'm an enthusiast, but I'm learning a lot. I like to feed that back. I love to tell people what I'm finding out. People seem to be really interested in it, and that's great. And if at the end of the day we all come out with more secure apps, then it's win-win for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say, I could imagine at DroidCon yours will be one of like the most watched or attended talks, because I had a look through the list and there's super interesting stuff on there, but there's some things that it's just like, I'm not going to find this out unless I go to this talk.
I think that's very kind. I think I definitely I can't remember exactly who's in my slot. I'm pretty sure it's Chris Baines from Twitter, so I'm pretty sure everyone will be there. I know I might not turn up to my own talk because I really wanted to go see Chris's. So if I'm not there, that's why. But it's I would love people to come down. As we all know, they're all recorded, so it's you won't be missing out if you don't come. Hopefully you'll come away and learn something new. But if you don't, go to Chris's, because Chris's will be awesome for sure.
Okay, cool. All right. So then I got a couple questions left, and then we can wrap. And then if there's anything else you wanted to talk about, we can. But you mentioned, so on the intake form that I sent, there was like, you know, is there any interesting stories? And you sent me a story that sounded super interesting that I have no way to work into a podcast about security. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, like, what's the deal with this water pistol assassin story?
So so when you asked what interesting stories do you have, well, I thought, well, do I have any interesting security stories? And the answer to that is unfortunately a resounding no. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't be allowed to disclose them because of where I work. So so the story behind the water pistols, right? So like I mentioned earlier, I started my career at a startup. And the only way I can describe it was like living in a Silicon Valley episode. We were a startup of a handful of people in London. I was a brand new Android engineer out of university. I'd done Android at that point for about probably like 2 or 3 months. So I knew nothing about the platform. I knew nothing about app development. And yet I was somehow in this job, in this startup, as the only Android engineer building this app. And it was great. And we had such a great time. And the water pistols came about where my boss, who's a really lovely Australian guy called John, he said, "Hey guys, I found this new thing out in London. It's called Street Wars." And I said, "Well, what's that?"
Okay.
Street Wars is it's something that's done worldwide. You might have heard of it if you're in the US. I think it's been done all over the country there. But essentially what it is it's a competition where a bunch of people sign up and they become assassins. And your job is to assassinate other members of this game. And this is a real world game. So you are walking the streets and you might bump into somebody you're supposed to assassinate. So you have on your person at all times a water pistol to pull out of your pocket and fire and squirt essentially the person you're supposed to assassin. And you're kind of given the person, so you're given minimal details about the person you're supposed to assassinate. You're given kind of a rough location of where they work, a rough location of where they live, and that's it. So with this went on for a month, and when I say a month, I mean we downed tools. We didn't do any development work for nearly a month, and we just were out to try and squirt somebody with a water pistol. And it took me all over London, and it's scary because you're being hunted yourself. So you're looking around every corner, seeing is there anybody shady, and some of the some of the stories of what I heard. Unfortunately, I didn't live in London. This was my problem as a brand new sort of graduate. I couldn't afford to live in London. I was still living at home, which at the time was in Oxfordshire. And it was great. It was great. So people I heard stories of people jumping off bridges, people, using a barge, like on a canal to escape.
Wow.
All the crazy stories. And it was great. And unfortunately I was assassinated. I was crossing the road, by Angel Station in London. And, somebody came out, ran out of a coffee shop, straight towards me. I ran into traffic, which in hindsight was the stupidest thing I could have done. Nearly got hit by a London bus, and unfortunately got squirted. So that was me out of the game. I can't remember exactly how our team did, but it was a great month, and it was such a great team to work with. The product we did was actually amazing. It was essentially so the company is called Bopple. I'll give it a shout. It was they're now based in Australia, but it was a food ordering app, essentially what every pub and club has nowadays because of COVID, where you could order your food to your table or for collection. We were doing that back in 2013, and nobody was ready for it. If we'd waited a few years, we would have absolutely cleaned up.
I was going to say
it was a great time, and I think. Probably a unique story. I can't imagine many of your listeners have taken a month off to become a water pistol assassin, but maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
No. I don't know anybody who's done that. I didn't know it was a thing, but just so that I have it clear, right? So, do you know what they look like? As in, like, you get a picture, or you just get a description? You get a picture.
Oh, you get both.
Okay, cool. I was going to say, because that would be crazy if you just got a description. That would be
really dangerous.
Like, a guy's got blonde hair and a beard. Yeah.
That would be the majority of people in London. So you would be. You do get a picture. I can't remember
everyone.
Unfortunately, this was, at this point, like I say, probably about 8 years ago. So it's quite a long time since I've done it. But if they ever do it again in London, I'm signing up, because it was great fun. And if they ever do it in wherever you're based, wherever your listeners are based, then 100% sign up. I don't know if you'll be able to get a sabbatical off work to do it, but definitely do it for sure.
If not, just take time. Just take as much holiday as you can.
Just take a month off.
I'm not advocating people should do that, but I would do it. Why not? Cool. All right, cool. So I have one question left, and then we can wrap. Just to bring it back to development a little bit, which is a question that I like to ask everybody. And the question is, what do you think separates an okay developer from a great developer?
Oh, I can't lie. I've got to be a little bit biased here. I think it's somebody that takes an interest in things like security, 100%. I think we have got plenty of amazing developers in our community, and we're very fortunate to have that many. But if you want to level up yourself, then 100% take a look at mobile app security. If you want to really, wow your boss and show them, if you want to scare people, perform a security analysis on your app and show people, this is what we're working with. You can go and you can work on this, and the fixes are relatively straightforward. So I think the difference between a great developer and a mediocre one, in my mind, is somebody that really focuses on areas such as security, those more niche areas, to level up, to learn more, if not to make your apps way better. And I think that's that's definitely how I'd summarize it. I don't know if that was a great answer, but that's definitely my answer for sure.
Nah, it's a pretty good answer. Everyone's had a different. Nobody's ever said like, oh, you have to be really good at code. Everybody I've had on the show has always said something different. And I think getting involved in like a niche area, whether it's security or something else, definitely separates you, and also like you learn a ton more that you wouldn't learn just by doing what everybody else is doing. So that totally makes sense to me.
Excellent.
So okay, cool. So I think that's everything that I have. So before I hit stop, can you tell people where they can find you, Twitter, your blog, anything else you want to share?
Sure. No, everyone, I'm sure you're probably best off finding me on Twitter. My handle is Spaghetti Code with a 4. And you can also find my website at spaghetti.dev. There's loads of resources on there. I've written a ton of blogs, and all of my talks and videos and links are on there. So definitely check that out. And of course, if you're at DroidCon, come say hello. I'm going to probably be bringing a hell of a lot of stickers. So, come grab some stickers, come say hello. If you can come to my talk, amazing. If not, you will definitely catch it online straight after. So I think that's probably the best place to find me.
All right, awesome. And then is there anything that you wanted to talk about or discuss that I didn't ask? No,
I don't think so. I think, really great questions. Thank you so much for asking them. They were really, really, really well thought out.
All right.
So thank you.
Sweet. All right, cool. So I'm just going to hit stop.